sense door consciousness. For example, an eye meets a form with corresponding engagement, which the Atthakatha glosses as manasikara. And then the corresponding class of consciousness will arise. So vijnana, for the most part in Buddhism, really means sense door cognition rather than consciousness in the very vague idea that we have of the term in English. So there are a number of ways in which consciousness is used in the era in cross cultures. As water will lend itself very naturally to this vague concept of consciousness. Water has no form, it has no shape. It will take on the shape of the thing, of the container which holds it. In exactly the same way, consciousness takes on the form or the shape of the object to which it is attached. So the eye sees an object, a form or a shape or a color. That form, shape, or color is the container for consciousness. Then your attention switches to your ear and a sound, and your consciousness takes on the form of that ear, of that sound. Now, there is a feeling that we have that consciousness is continuous flow throughout these different things. But consciousness is shaped or formed by the thing to which it is pointed to. This is why water is a natural symbol and a universal symbol for consciousness. It naturally flows onto different objects while having no form of itself. Water can be steam, it can be snow, it can be a river, it can be a sea or an ocean. So water naturally takes on these different forms. And in that sense, I would say that as consciousness, water is closer, the symbology of water is closer to the term citta than it is to the term vijnana. Citta in the Satipatthana Sutta, it says one knows mind knowing mind, or citta, the understanding of citta. Citta there can be bright, can be dull, can be expanded, can be contracted, can be caught up in lust, can be caught up in desire. It can be refined, it can be coarse. So there are many different forms that citta can take. Again, water naturally lends itself to this metaphor or analogy because our citta can take on so many forms. So water can take on many forms. It can be an ocean. It can be a body of water with evil, nasty things lurking in the bottom of it. So many Buddhist examples. For example, crocodiles lying in wait in the water is a metaphor for sensual lust. If you get caught up in it, there are nasty things about to bite you. So this is why water is across cultures. Even in the Old Testament, for example, God wants to draw a distinction between the innate God consciousness and consciousness of objects. And he says, people, this is in Jeremiah, he says, people have forsaken me, who am the fount of living waters, and hewn themselves broken cisterns that can hold no water. Now, a cistern was originally a rock that people would carve in the desert, would hollow out these rocks and use them to hold water. But the more you hollow out the rock, the greater the danger of cracking the rock. And if you crack the rock, the water will leak out fast or slow, depending on the crack. So here in the Old Testament, we see that the water goes to the form that contains it. And this is a symbol for consciousness that is caught up in sense desires, and sense desires cannot hold the water. They naturally leak. And ignored, I, who am the fountain of living waters, suggests there is a fountain or original source of that consciousness that is independent to the objects to which it is projected. We see the exact same analogy in the journey to the west, where the stone and the monkeys on the mountainside. So we want to follow the river down to see where it goes. And the stone monkey says, no, we should follow the river to the source to find out what is at the source of it. And that is how the stone monkey becomes king of the monkeys. The Buddha in the Theravada suttas, he also used water, the river metaphor very commonly. I put one of the examples on screen, but there are thousands and thousands of these examples. Suppose a man being swept by the current of a river. It looks very charming and inviting. But a wise man might stand on the bank and say, hey, even though you are swept along by the current of this river that looks very inviting, nonetheless, further down the pool, further down the river, are waves and whirlpools with dangerous creatures which can possess you. When you reach there, you will undergo death or deadly suffering. Hearing that, a man may struggle with hands and feet to go against the current. I might mention Peter Macefield, a former, or late, I should say, since he passed away a couple of years ago, professor of Mahajula, wrote in his thesis a very good idea that the term sodapanna should not be considered to be stream enterer, but should be considered to be sound enterer. He points out that whenever you find water in Buddhist analogies, as a stream especially, it's something dangerous, that is something to be got out of or gone against, and not something to be entered, that is to go with the flow. He makes a very good case for this in his thesis. So we see water as a metaphor for a river. We also see water as a metaphor for the sea. The most striking example, or well-known example, is where the Buddha describes Dhamma as being a raft, and a raft is something to cross over the sea. The sea is always a metaphor for sense desires, again, across cultures, across eons. So Dhamma as a raft is to cross over the sea, to cross over this dangerous, deep, dark, forbidding ocean filled with natural enemies and evil creatures. And this is something that we want to cross over, and why the Dhamma is compared to a raft. I put on just a very short, nice short clip here that sums up, again, from the Theravada Suttas. I call greed to be a great flood, hunger to be a swift current, preoccupations are ripples, sensuality a bog, hard to cross over. Not deviating from the truth, a sage stands on high ground. Makes it very clear, the sea, the water, this kind of water is not to be entered into. Another example from the sea metaphor in this sutta makes it very clear that to whatever level you are engaged in the water, this is to be got out of. Point number 7, an individual coming to the service crosses over, reaches the far shore, and stands on high ground. You want to get out of the sea of sense desires. The water also has the property that it can be used for cleaning. Purified water is a very good analogy for purified consciousness. And again, this is across cultures. One of my favorite fairy tales uses the symbol of dew forming on the tip of a blade of grass to symbolize purified consciousness. Water can wash things, but it doesn't take on those impurities. It can be purified away from those imperfections if you are able to do practice in the right manner. So water is also a symbol for purified consciousness. And here we don't see oceans, we don't see rivers, we see small drops, or we see small pools. So I've used the classic water metaphor in Theravada Buddhism. Suppose there were a pool of water, clear and free from, I don't know, trash. Imperfection would be a better word here. A man with good eyesight standing there on the bank would see what is contained within that pool. In the same way, the water would know his own benefit or the benefit of others, the unspoiled nature of his mind. So here water is very clearly, in its purified form, is a metaphor for the mind that has been purified. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that there are mechanics to storytelling. There are certain symbols that lend themselves naturally as a form of shortcutting to our understanding. Shoes and fruit and wolves and foxes and kings and princesses. These are all universal symbols that can be used in specific mechanical fashion. I've raised today just the example of water alone, and how it is nearly always a symbol for consciousness across cultures, across eons, and in Buddhism also. So I would like to offer this for reflection today. So our moderator, I have concluded.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much,
Within
Venerable.
10 minutes.
You need more 10 minutes?
No, I finished. I say I finished within 10 minutes.
Thank you.
I'm
Yes.
very obedient.
Yes, okay. So many cultures around the world and the history has put the storytelling and show the core beliefs and understanding of the world about them. And certain symbols are used to represent the abstract concepts through the cultural stories. Venerable Pandit show us how water is used as a symbol for consciousness, and there is a meaning behind the symbol of water. And this suggests that the water is natural symbols and is common in other traditions as well. So anyone here, if you have any question regarding this topic, you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand to ask Venerable Pandit about the symbol, symbolic as the water
No,
as
when
symbol.
she says raise your hand, Dr. Sunil, it means you raise your hand in the not
Yes.
actually raise your hand.
I'm sorry. Yes, tapping the icon. Yes, tapping
Okay,
the icon.
thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you for the excellent talk. I enjoyed your vision about the water, and the water. I keep thinking about it when I read the Buddhist narrative and Buddhist suttas and Mee Eain. But what I really interested in about your talk is the point when you start inscription, chanting, and storytelling. So which one do you think prefer? Because as far as I understand, storytelling is among the most effective way to contact with the ordinary people, to deal with the ordinary people getting into the Buddhism. Maybe inscription and chanting very important part of a Buddhist community or Buddhist Sangha, but contact with the ordinary people, a kind of a Buddhist propagation, I think storytelling, narrative could be the most important thing for Buddhism, for the future, especially the young generation. How can we teach, meditation first to the kindergarten student? How can we do something about, the life we are going to have is full of suffering to the elementary school student? It is very difficult. But as far as I understand, narrative could be the key for the propagation of Buddhism as well as Buddhism around the young generation. So what do you think about, which one do you think among the most important thing you'd like to do for the rest of your monkhood or for the benefit of all human beings? I'd like to hear your own idea about it.
Yes, thank you. There are advantages and disadvantages to each different form of transmitting wisdom. The disadvantage of stories is that they can be changed, they can be manipulated. Later editors can come along and start changing the symbols and the ideas according to what they think. And we often well, I've often found this, especially with some Westerners, and they like to change Buddhism a little bit and say this is what Buddhism would be if the Buddha was as clever as I am. I give, for example, a teacher who I saw saying that there is nothing wrong with sense desire, that we should engage in the senses and enjoy things. And I said, well, he may be right, but that's not Buddhism. He's changed it. So storytelling, you can change things, which is a little bit dangerous. Recitation is the most accurate form of storytelling, but it does really only work for the people who are doing the recitations. When you had hundreds of thousands of monks and nuns coming together and reciting together, this was incredibly powerful. But as Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism died down, the scriptures in Sri Lanka and Buddhaghosa were really written down because there weren't enough monks to do the recitations anymore. So there are advantages and disadvantages to these. I'll note that the Buddha did use a lot of stories, but almost uniquely amongst all world teachers, he explained every story that he told. For example, he would say, imagine you had a bowl of oil on your head and you couldn't spill a single drop, or somebody with a big sword will come and cut off your head. So in the same way, if you're not mindful, Mara can come in and kill you and hurt you. So the Buddha used stories, but he always explained what he meant by the story, which is almost unique in traditions. Last very quick point, I do agree with you how powerful storytelling is and how much storytelling has played in the transmission of Buddhism. But I would like to emphasize that this is tied together with the art. So the stories were usually presented in art, and the art was commissioned by kings and queens. So we've been incredibly lucky in Buddhism that Buddhism has been transmitted due to kings and queens and powerful people commissioning beautiful art that could then transmit the stories. I give, for example, very briefly, the story of the Buddha's mother when she becomes pregnant with the Buddha and she dreams about the white elephant entering into her womb. This is a beautiful, powerful story that can be depicted on a wall. And that's why many of the stories that got popular in Buddhism were stories that could be painted.
Yes, so thank you so much, Venerable Pandit and Professor Sunil. So next, we are pleased to welcome the next presenter, Venerable Chondok Park from Dongkok University. Yes, so let me briefly introduce his biography. Venerable Chondok is an associate professor of the College of Buddhism at Dongkok University in South Korea. He received his Doctoral of Philosophy degree in South Asian Studies at the University of Oxford in 2005 based on his dissertation entitled A Translation and Study of Selected Avadanas of the Mulavasavaditadin Vinaya. His main research interest is the Buddhist narrative in Indian Buddhist meditation. And today he will be presenting his work on the story of two Nagas and Kings Bimbisara in the Mulasavasti Wadin Vinaya. So please, Venerable.
Hello. Oh,
yes.
You can see me?
No. No, we cannot see you.
How about? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Now it's working now. Yeah. I was confused. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hello. I'm Jong-dong. Nice meeting all of you. And first of all, I have to say that I do not really like this kind of online or web meeting. We should get together, and we should share our ideas person to person. So this is not a bit, right. And I'm also doing my the presentation in the office of Dongguk University. And just a moment ago, I just looked, and now the Korea is quite good time. The morning time is about 17, 18 degrees Celsius, and the daytime is 24, 25 degrees Celsius. So it's very the good time to have this kind of academic meeting. So next time you should come to Korea at this time of the year, and you can enjoy together Korean autumn and also in academic meeting. So let me begin my the presentation. How about the share? Yes. Oh.
Yes, can you share your presentation?
Yeah, just I'm looking for the share icon.
Okay.
This from the system we use at Dongguk.
You can click
okay.
share.
Okay. Now, okay. I find it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. How about this one? Okay. Yeah. Can you see the title of my presentation? So the title of my presentation is The Story of Two Nagas and King Bimbisara in the Mullah Sarwastivadin Vinaya. Before dealing with the story, just let me talk briefly about Mullah Sarwastivadin Vinaya. As you know, there are several kinds of Vinayas in our Buddhist traditions. And Mullah Sarvastivadin Vinaya is one of them. And if you compare stories of Mullah Sarvastivadin Vinaya and those in other Vinayas, you can easily find them many times. Stories in Mullah Sarvastivadin Vinaya are more developed and quite often longer than those in their counterparts. And the stories are from literary viewpoint, stories are much more interesting than others. Usually, the other Vinayas, they just emphasize to their messages, but the Mullah Sarvastivadin Vinaya, they also consider the kind of literary interesting, something that they think that they thought that the stories should be interesting. Otherwise, it's not. Otherwise, nobody listens or nobody reads. So yeah, I'm going to start the story of the two Nagas and King Bimbisara. In Indian tradition, the Nagas serve as fierce guardians of waters and of the abundance that lies beneath the earth. Besides, Nagas play a positive role in Buddhist account. A number of Jataka stories record the Nagas' generosity toward the Bodhisattva, while others show their gratitude for receiving religious instructions. This story of two Nagas and King Bimbisara is a good example of how the Mullah Sarvastivadin Vinaya reorganizes the story based on the Indian folk tradition in which both king and Nagas take important roles. So here, we have to think about situation of Buddhism in India when Buddhism appeared. And another point is that the Mullah Sarvastivadin's usual folk tale to establish the Buddha above Naga belief and kingship in traditional Indian society. Regarding the relation between Buddhism and Naga beliefs, establishing a relation to Naga belief was the primary concern of Indian religions. In spite of all the patronage of Ashoka and the glorious account of the popularity of Buddhism in Kashmir, the fact remains that Buddhism had to face a strong opposition in the country from the established belief in Naga worship. Naga beliefs were quite common in India when Buddhism made its appearance, and that is the reason why the legend of Nagas and their conversion by the Buddha occur occasionally in Buddhist texts. And another main character is the Bimbisara in the story. Bimbisara's character is described negatively in this story, in contrast with other texts, where from his first dana to the Buddha until the time of his death, a period of 37 years, Bimbisara does all in his power to help the new religion, Buddhism. In the beginning of the story, Bimbisara does not respect the Buddha. The negative description of Bimbisara is designed to produce conflict in the story. Furthermore, this negative description of the king maximizes the dramatic conflict. Although the conflict is between the two Nagas and Bimbisara, it is noteworthy that the reason for their conflict is the Buddha. The two orders of existence, or the two super beings who dominate all other beings, they are presumed to be equal under the Buddha. It becomes clear that the Buddha intervenes in this traditional relationship, yet he still keeps his sense of distance. It means that, in the story, in the development of the story, Buddha does not really, involve directly in conflict between two Nagas and Bimbisara. In this story, the conflict between Bimbisara and the two Naga kings is noteworthy because as Nagas are guardians of water and of abundance, and Bimbisara represents the highest worldly power, both parties are dependent upon each other. Another interesting point in this story is that it shows how Buddhism as a new religious movement established its relation to the folk tradition. The Buddha asserts his superiority over other gods and kingship, and while the older deities and kingship continue to function under the Buddha's superiority, both Nagas and Bimbisara ask for the Buddha's teaching, and at the same time, they are in trouble. To understand the characteristics of this story of the Mulla Sarvastivadin Vinaya, it can be reconstructed without the Buddha. The left part is the basic story. We can follow the story with only basic story. In here, we cannot find the Buddha. So then I will show how Buddhists put their Buddhist flavor in the story. First, the basic story is there were two Nagas called Girika and Bhalmika, and due to their virtue, the country was always able to enjoy abundant harvest. Then King Bimbisara desired that the two Nagas should respect him, but they refused. So Bimbisara asked them to leave. So once two Nagas they left, Rajagrha suffered from a serious drought. Then Bimbisara realized that he had made the Nagas leave. Then Bimbisara repented and asked them to come back. The Nagas asked the king to build shrines for them. When the king had built a shrine, the Nagas stayed there with their relatives and received the king's offerings. This is the basic story, and with the story, we can understand the storyline fully. And this story, and now we see how the Mulla Sarvastivadins put kind of Buddhist flavor in this basic story, and they intervene almost every step to put the story make into Buddhist, something Buddhist. For example, in the first stage, two Nagas called Girika and Bhalmika, due to their virtue, they were already abundant harvest. Then the story moved to that. Then Hirika and Valmika took refuge in the Buddha. So in the first stage, the story introduced that two Nagas, they took refuge in the Buddha. And next stage, then King Bimbisara desired that two Nagas should respect him. They refused. So Bimbisara asked them to leave. So this is the beginning of the conflict between two the beings, two Nagas and Bimbisara. Now there is a conflict, and at this time, what the Buddha did, due to the Buddha's teaching, the Nagas decide to respect the Dharma, not Bimbisara. At this stage, two Nagas asked the Buddha, what should they do? And the Buddha told them, Dharma is the most important, not the king. So the two Nagas, they decide to choose the Buddha. And next stage, once two Nagas left, Rajagrha suffered from a serious drought. Then Bimbisara realized that he had made the Nagas leave. This is the magic one. Then how look at the Buddha's intervention. Then Bimbisara went to see the Buddha and see what happened. Then the Buddha made Bimbisara realize that he had done to the Nagas because Bimbisara made them leave. Every time the Buddha just stay in his place, but the two Nagas and Bimbisara, whenever they have a problem or conflict, they went to see the Buddha and ask for solution. And the Buddha shows the way. And the next stage, then Bimbisara repented and asked the Nagas to come back. Then the Buddha, in the Buddha's intervention, then the Buddha advised Bimbisara that he should seek the Nagas' forgiveness and arrange the meeting between them. So now Buddha arranged everything. He made two the Nagas and Bimbisara reconcile each other. Then finally, the Nagas asked the king to build a shrine for them. And when the king had built a shrine, the Nagas stayed there with their relatives and received the king's offering. Now this is the story I want to show, and I just showed how Buddha Sarvastivadins put the Buddhist flavor on the basic storyline. So now, without Buddha's intervention, the story itself, we cannot see, anything religious. But from the Buddha's intervention part, now story became a complete Buddhist one. So without, directly intervening between them, in other words, so retaining the sense of withdrawal, because the Buddha always keep the distance from them. The Buddha behaves as a supreme guarantor of the cosmic order by resolving the conflict between the Nagas and Bimbisara. Kind of now the Buddha is kind of the cosmic, cosmic order. He can solve everything, the problems on the planet. So those Nagas or Bimbisara, they just they just sometimes they fight, sometimes they reconcile. Everything is is a kind of under the Buddha's control. So this clearly shows that how kind of Buddhism wants to be accepted in the Indian folk tradition. So from making this kind of story, the Buddhist or the Buddha Sarvastivadins, they try to Buddhism accepted in Indian society as a kind of good or high religion, and they want to show them Buddha is the highest being who can control everything, who is the highest one among the Nagas or among the kings. And besides, this study shows that it is noteworthy how important is the close relationship between the lay people and the Buddha through exchange of respect and Dharma. Any disruption of the relationship causes a serious result. This, the story or this Abadana format shows how it is impolite for lay people and others not to provide proper respect to the Buddha. The theme is, this theme is, embellished or adorned by many the literary devices like aspiration or predictions in the story. Finally, it is not useful to apply our modern concept of creativity or originality to this Abadana of the Mullah Sarvasvati Vinaya. For the Mullah Sarvastivadins, the primary concern of their Abadanas or their stories was not kind of innovativity, but moral conventionality supported by literary invention. The comparison between the Abadanas of Mullah Sarvasvati Vinaya and its counterpart in other Vinayas in our Buddhist text tradition shows that Mullah Sarvastivadins' effective mobilization of all available literary devices to preserve their moral conservatism. Okay, thank you. This is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for the meaningful presentation on the topic. So now we would like to ask if the participant have any question for this topic, the story of two Nagas and King Bimbisara. Yes. So while waiting for gathering the question, I would like to do some quick summary. Naga beliefs were quite common in India when Buddhism made its appearance, and that is the reason why the legend of Nagas and their conversion by the Buddha occur occasionally in the Buddhist texts. And Venerable Chongdok stated an interesting point in the story of the conflict between the two Nagas and Bimbisara, that it shows how Buddhism as the new religions movement established its relation to the folk tradition. And Venerable also attempted to show how Buddhism wants to be accepted in the Indian folk tradition.
I think it's a perfect summary.
Right. So anyone, if you have any question, you can tapping the raising hand icon, or you can type in the chat box and we will read them.
Well, everyone wants to move to next speaker.
Okay, you're free to ask our potential speaker who is very expertise on this topic. Yes, seem to be very quiet here. Anyone? This is a very good chance. Okay, we got some comments. Venerable explained everything so well, and they kind of understand thoroughly. And narratives are effective in transmitting knowledge, but can be an obscuration to knowledge around with legends and mysticism. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems that the audience enjoy your presentation and they kind of understand the topic. And anyway, and they feel thankful that you shared this deep knowledge and wisdom with them. And they also commented, thank you, Venerable, for sharing. Okay, thank you so much for sharing this. Yes, okay, we have Professor Frank. You would like to ask a question? Oh, okay. So thank you so much.
Ask a question. I hadn't prepared a question, but
okay. So
my question is this: Venerable, do you see in the development of the Naga and related kinds of serpent themes the same thing I do, which is that sometimes this is a force for the good, as when the Naga Musalinda covers the Buddha, sheltering the Buddha from rain, and other times it is not. So that the symbolism is quite various depending on.
Yeah, I agree.
Your comment, please.
Yeah. The Naga topic is a quite, the broad topic, that they appeared in many cases in many styles. So we cannot say the Naga is just in one, the one type. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Venerable. And next, we would like to invite the next speaker, Professor Dr. Frank Hoffman. He is a lecturer at IBSC of our university at MCU. And he's also a visiting scholar associated in South Asia Center at University of Pennsylvania during the summers. Professor Frank received a PhD in philosophy of religion at King's College, University of London, and MA in philosophy at University of Hawaii, and a BA in philosophy at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Professor Hoffman has a 126 published item, approximately, including books and book chapters, journals, articles, and many books reviews. Okay, and right now I think it is auspicious time that he will be presenting his work on Buddhist discourses as philosophy. Please, Professor.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Nadnapal. So now I want to share a screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. This is the abstract of the presentation, and I hope when we start to put these together as articles, I'll be able to do a little bit more. Philosophical inquiry starts with a debatable question. That is a question of genuine inquiry, and not one with a pat answer that is obvious from the outset. In his discourses of the Sutta Pitaka, the Buddha engages other teachers in question and answer debates in which they themselves inquire and learn. Buddha uses several argument strategies in dealing with questions from Jains, Brahmins, and others. The discourses of the Buddha occur as dialogues in real life that connect narrative to philosophy. Buddha's discourses are related to the broader philosophical discussions of consistency and self-contradiction, fact, evidence, argument, and the achievement of wisdom. These are neither Asian nor Western, but human concerns. The purpose of this paper is to highlight the Buddha's contribution to doing philosophy in narrative discourse. So this is the outline of section 1 on Buddhist narratives. I work on Angulimala Sutta and Aganya Sutta. Some Buddhist argument strategies, section 2. Section 3, how Western and Buddhist philosophies are sometimes compatible in narrative types. And I give examples from Richard Eldridge and Amy Kine's work. Section 4, disputable questions and questions of genuine inquiry in Buddhist narratives. Section 5, how did the Buddha arrive at new knowledge? And then I recap the main argument. Okay, starting it out, would like to talk about these two suttas very briefly. The discourse to Angulimala, which many people know because it's widely used in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Sometimes when a woman is in childbirth or has had a baby, the monks will come and recite. Angulimala was a much feared highwayman and serial killer. In the narrative in which he failed to kill the Buddha, the difference between them was Buddha is peaceful and Angulimala was hateful, is presented. This is just a segment of a very long and important sutta. The Aganya Sutta on origins has several parts to it. It's a complex sutta. But one aspect is in this sutta, monks learned how it was better to be a son of the Buddha instead of a son of Brahma, how life developed on earth, how social order happened, and how wisdom and virtue makes a person a true worthy. The template for this talk is like this, subject, topic, paper title, you can see. And the thesis is that Angulimala Sutta and Aganya Sutta converge with the contemporary philosophy of Eldridge and Kind on the point of the importance of ethical action by making of ourselves an artistic narrative in life through choices. And the Buddha made a contribution to doing philosophy as living truth or Dhamma in body, speech, and mind with skillful action without written words. So these are some Buddhist argument strategies. You're probably familiar with the fourfold logic, the tetralemma. And I interpret it as P, not P, both in part, and neither, because indescribable, because the third and fourth lemmas will be logically unclear if we don't give some interpretation. This is only one way to manage it. Secondly, taking the noble silence when faced with questions with no clear answers. You always see great monks in Thailand taking this approach. If someone tries to pin them down to an either or, and neither of the sides are really very reasonable, they take the noble silence, or they just say, well, dogma, issuing a direct rebuke. For example, the misrepresentation by Sati, the fisherman's son, when he keeps insisting that insofar as I understand Dhamma, Lord, consciousness is vijnana, and it is basically a substance. And one of the rare cases where Buddha really says, no, haven't I told you in many a figure that this is not true, Sati? Another is by telling a Dhamma story at first and letting the hearer infer an implied example. By letting something be an open question, such as the 10 undetermined metaphysical questions, which the Buddha set aside, and taking a provisional point of view and arguing it to see if the view survives criticism over time. For example, in the Seven Sons Sutta, we might consider, what is it really? Is it a prophecy, an open-ended prophecy, or is it a prediction about the end of worlds? So one question that comes up here is that what is taking sides in a Buddhist way? Well, you may remember Ivy Horner's old translation of wordy warfare being condemned so that one cannot mindlessly or aggressively take sides from a Buddhist point of view. And on Buddha's advice, right speech is talk about Dhamma or remain silent, as we see when he approaches the loudmouth Sandaka and interrupts his more or less talking trash with monks and says, look, this is not allowed. Talk Dhamma or be silent. The Brahma Viharas are important to consider in taking sides in a Buddhist way. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. They are followed in all things, including when we take sides. There should be no kodana, no hatred. The three poisons, lobha, dosa, and moha, are rejected. The idea is to generate more light and less heat. The Eightfold Path is accepted, and there you have samadhi, right view, samasankappa, right intention, right speech, samavacha, right action, kamanta, right livelihood, sama ajiva, right effort, samavayama, right mindfulness or sati, and concentration, samasamadhi. I'm interested in Asian and comparative philosophy in addition to Buddhist studies, and today I'm going to talk about that a little bit. How Western philosophy and Buddhist philosophy are compatible sometimes in narrative types. In the larger version, I'll be talking about these thinkers in greater detail, but roughly and for now, a very classic article that deals with the nature of religious belief is by Richard Braithwaite. And he took the view, wasn't very popular at the time, that religious belief involves the telling, but not the assertion as fact of certain stories. And he suggested that the function of these stories was that they be meditated upon. Richard Eldridge, much more recently in a book called Leading Human Life, talked about how one's life is made into art by ethical actions. Eldridge interprets Wittgenstein as a romanticist, confronting the human need to pursue expressive freedom within the limits imposed by culture. Quite recently, Amy Kind, in a very interesting book called Persons and Personal Identity, amongst an amazing array of contemporary examples, a major point emerges that persons are processes, and when you act, you create yourself. Persons are processes rather than substances is, of course, compatible with this point. I guess the cutting edge collection of papers for this narrative concept from a philosophical view is this one. Buddhist literature as philosophy, Buddhist philosophy as literature, which explores the interface between the two, 2021 SUNY Press. So let's dig into disputable questions and questions of genuine inquiry in Buddhist narratives. What are these anyway? What are questions of genuine inquiry? I want to say they continue to invite inquiry time after time, plumb the depths of our imagination, call our sensibilities into play, and excite our intellect. Questions of genuine inquiry are invitations to contemplation, like the rock garden at Ryoanji in Kyoto. All of this is in contrast to a question, which is a simple matter of fact. What are debatable questions? Debatable questions are those with more than one reasonable answer, where we may feel called upon to take an existential risk and argue for one side. Okay, so how do we go about discovering new knowledge? Might be a question in the back of your mind. We're always being told, by your teachers, especially dissertation students, I want to see new knowledge created in your work. So what counts as evidence? How does that evidence relate to fact? How does that evidence relate to the discovery of new knowledge? And how did Lord Buddha arrive at new knowledge and wisdom? The next slides are about these matters. Questions for discovery. In trying to discover, there are some very important questions. Why? In the old edition of Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the general editor, Paul Edwards, has an article on the concept of why. It's really brilliant. Another question, what does it mean? In the linguistic turn in 20th century philosophy, this question went prior to the question, how do you know? So you have a question about meaning and a question about knowledge. What's the evidence? Which distinctions do I need to make progress on my question? After we think about it and know that the thesis statement is on a debatable question and is meaningful, neither self-contradictory nor nonsense, then we can look for appropriate evidence. Experiential questions require, as the Buddhist questions did, personal investigation and sometimes mindfulness meditation to progress through the truth, to the truth. Factual claims can be proven by correspondence or coherence with other factual statements, and conceptual or definitional claims can be proven by showing their fit or coherence with other conceptual statements. What is contributing to new knowledge? And what is just repeating the words of others? What is it to be a genuine scholar who contributes to new knowledge? Contributing to new knowledge and making a contribution to the field are short phrases upheld by all universities of good quality as an ideal for their PhD students. This implies, for one thing, that a dissertation to present new knowledge may not be derivative, that is, may not be dependent entirely on the work of other scholars, like old wine in new bottles. It also implies that materials discussed have been analyzed or divided into parts, each part discussed thoroughly and synthesized, brought together in a coherent way. This means that we may not simply copy and paste Buddhist suttas or other authoritative texts and then stop, as if research is only a matter of copy and paste. Looking at Buddha, how did the Buddha arrive at new knowledge? We know from the Kalama Sutta, oft-quoted, by not depending on report, tradition, hearsay, by knowing and seeing for himself, by cultivating the abhinya, ending in destroying the asavas, thought by some scholars to be his distinctive achievement, because it seems that the yogic masters he studied with did not have this last one in the Chao opinion. In this mindful process, he was doing philosophy as living truth or Dhamma in his own body, speech, and mind, with skillful action and no written words. Well, here's the recap. I give you a main argument. One, in the Angulimala Sutta, the serial killer with the garland of fingers becomes ahimsika by his conversion to Buddhism and subsequent reformation of character into Mr. Harmless. Harmlessness is also seen in the Aganya Sutta, where caste and lineage are unimportant compared to moral action and Dhamma. 3, as a corollary from 1 and 2, both the Angulimala Sutta and the Aganya Sutta emphasize that moral action can change a person for the better, and in assessing someone's worth is superior to using caste and lineage. 4, Richard Eldridge emphasized how we can create ourselves as an artistic novel by the ethical choices we make, as the philosopher Wittgenstein, he believes, did. Similarly, 5, Amy Kind indicated that the ethical choices we make shape the narrative artwork we become by our actions. And in Buddhism, we would say by our kusala karma. 6, as a corollary of 4 and 5, Eldridge and Kind represent a contemporary philosophical emphasis on persons as processes that is consistent with Buddhism, and which shows how we can make of ourselves an artistic narrative in life by our own choices. 7, I submit that Buddha made a contribution to doing philosophy as living truth or Dhamma in his own body, speech, and mind, without written words. So I conclude that Angulimala and Aganya Sutta converge with contemporary philosophy of, for example, Eldridge and Kind, on the point of the importance of ethical action by making of ourselves an artistic narrative in life through our choices. And the Buddha made a contribution to doing philosophy as living truth or Dhamma in body, speech, and mind, with skillful action and no written words. And this is a postscript, 1 page, not part of the paper, but a personal statement I want to make. East Asia and Southeast Asia need non-traditional, skillful means to save their traditional treasure, Buddhism. Some temples in Thailand lack an abbot, and so lack monks, nuns, and laity. However, tradition and transformation coexist in the process. Modernity needs to be re-understood as a potential resource for saving and reinvigorating tradition. To accomplish this, the 3 traditions need to be open to each other. MCU's Common Buddhist Text is a partial solution to this crisis of compartmentalization. this international conference is another skillful means effort towards cooperation between Buddhist traditions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Frank. So Professor Frank attempted to show us that the Buddha uses several argument strategies in dealing with question. And the Buddha's discourses are related to philosophical discussion of the consistency and self-contradiction, fact, evidence, and arguments, and achievement of wisdom. And Professor Frank also highlighted the Buddha's contribution to doing philosophy in narrative discourses. So at this time, we would like to move on to Q&A. You can ask a question by tapping the hand icon to raise your hand for a question, or typing your question in the chat box, and I will read it. So please feel free now to ask your question. Yeah, let me check the chat box. Is MCU Common Buddhist text available to the public or MCU students?
Yes, I'm very happy to get this question and to promote the greater awareness of it. In fact, there is a storeroom with a large number of these texts, and I suggest that you contact Venerable Ajahn Chah Wirsak to know more about the possibility of your getting one. When I went to California a couple of summers ago to a conference there, I took 20 of these and gave them to seminar participants in Common Buddhist text. So we need to get the word out more, but certainly they are available, and they're often used as gifts wrapped up in a nice ribbon for visiting lecturers here.
Yes, thank you. And now we seem to have a question from Professor Huang Sunil. Do you want to ask a question to Professor Frank? Please turn on your microphone. Let me check your microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the interesting talk, Dr. Frank Hoffman. And as a philosopher, you emphasize the importance of a philosophical message, delivering through Buddhist narrative. So as I understand, Buddhist narrative can deliver a kind of ethical teaching, can also deliver philosophical messages, and also I think Buddhist narrative can deliver a kind of religious aspiration to the general public. Maybe there are more areas Buddhist narrative can deliver. Which area do you think is most important? And I'd like to hear in terms of religious aspiration, the Pandit, the previous speaker said, storytelling is good, but people can change it, But the generation become different. So the audience of the Buddha, almost 2,500 years ago, and the audience at the moment, in the contemporary world, they are different. Maybe Buddhist storytelling can change according to the audience, the Buddhist tradition paced of it. It was called Upaya Kaushalya, skill in means in Buddhism. So what do you think about that?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. First, I just want to quickly say that ethics is considered as a branch of philosophy, not something separate. So you have logic, ethics, metaphysics or theory of reality. There are several branches, philosophies of, but it is surely a branch of philosophy. And for contemporary philosophers, even now in the 21st century, ethics remains a primary concern. So I think the fact that sila, morality, is such a pillar of the sila, samadhi, and panya, that Buddhism is very committed to ethics in the sense of morality And if you dig a little deeper, perhaps you can find some statements of principle, or maybe more than one statement of principle. I remember Damien Cohn had a postscript on this topic in his first book on Buddhism and ethics. So it is a topic very interesting to philosophers. That's where we can meet quite readily the Buddhist position. I don't know if it's more important than other things. I think from my own point of view, Buddhism can be studied from any discipline in the university curriculum that has a humanities base. For example, art history, Buddhism and literature, Buddhism and social science. And even now, it's shaded off in publications into Buddhism and brain science, Buddhism and gender issues. So there are many parts of the university curriculum that can have courses on Buddhism. So I think this is our great hope for the future academically. And our great hope for the practice is the message that Dr. Hansa brought us at the very beginning. But truly, I believe there has to be a unity among us, among Buddhists. Because if we argue among ourselves, what are we doing? Okay, that's how I would answer. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much, Professor Frank and Professor Sunil. So next, let me invite the next speaker. We are pleased to welcome Assistant Professor Kung Gray Kim from Dongkok University. So Assistant Professor Dr. Kung Gray Kim has been a lecturer at the College of Buddhism. Let me here. Yes. And yes, so please let me continue. In South Korea since 2020, and he earned a PhD and an MA in Buddhist Studies from Dongkok University. And he also compiled a number of academic research papers, and his research interest focuses on Indian philosophy and early Buddhism. And today he will be presenting his work on revisiting the narrative Dipavamsa and its implication, a critical examination of Dipavamsa 1.24 to 25. So please, Professor.
So could you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay, okay. So I'm gonna start it. So yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me here. So my name is Kyung-rae Kim, who is an assistant professor in Dongkok University. So what I'm gonna do in this short talk is about revisiting the narrative of Dipavamsa and its implication. But I'm gonna just check only two very short verses. Yeah, so check it. Oh, please have a look at this red colored paragraph. So, however, one passage which we would like to think of as corrupt in the Dipavamsa locates the same event in 118 after the Nirvana. So, actually, my research begins with this criticism by Lamotte. So, in my opinion, well, determining that there's a problem with the original text may be a kind of dereliction of work for the researcher, I think. But therefore, I would like to present some possibilities, assuming that this text, I mean the Dipavamsa, the original text, provides correct information for us. So let me check just briefly about the very general narratives about three councils. So according to the general Theravadian sources, Kassapa was traveling with his followers when the Buddha passed away. So, but at that time, a monk whose name was Subhatta just rejoiced at the loss of his teacher. So Kassapa decided to perform a joint recitation with 500 arahats, like this, as you see in the screen. So it was decided that they should go to Rajagriha for the rainy season to give there a joint recitation. It is the kind of general narrative of the first council based on the Theravadian sources. I mean the Pali, Pali text. And how about the second council? So 100 years after the Buddha's death, the monks of Vaishali promulgated 10 practices. So at that moment, some monks received gold and silver for the needs of the community. So the second council was happened because of this kind of rule, Vinaya. So the thing is, do we have to just follow the rule either flexibly or strictly or just directly or something like that? And the problem is no problem. The point is the third council. So as Lamot mentioned above, the third council is described only in the Theravadan sources, and it describes Asoka, the great king, tried to purify the Buddhist community in mainland India, like that, and made a broad propagation around the pan-Indian territories. So actually this council is very important. This council is very important because for the Theravada tradition, since it supports the origin and authority of Theravada tradition itself, actually. So based on this general information, it's very general stuff. So I'm gonna scrutinize the two verses of Dipabangsa, namely the first chapter, the 24 and the 25 verses. So 24 and then 25 like this. So please let me share some detailed grammatic analysis on these two verses in order to show you how I understand these kind of problematic verses, especially here, tato parang in verse 25. Here, I wrote down several things, but it's not that much important, so I'm gonna just skip it. So upada here is just negative absolutive, so of upadiyati. So it refers that without reminder, without any reminder, without any fuel for the next life or for the rebirth, something like that. Parinipai is an aorist, third singular aorist form of parinipati, but here, as Stephen Collins mentioned, aorist form also could cover conditional status. So parinipai is a kind of conditional. Yeah, I'm gonna die, or I would die. I would be in parinipati. And attangata is aluk samasa. So it's a kind of twisted samasa, compound. It means just sunset. So from my analysis of this first two padas, it means it can be translated like, just like the sunset, I would die without remainder. Yeah, so I'm not gonna come back. But it's not the main topic of my talk. But how do you think about it? The sun is always reborn every day, especially just like today. So I think it's not a good simile, because here it implies that I'm not gonna come back anymore, but unfortunately the sun always comes back every morning. So it's kind of another topic, but yeah, it is the weakness of the text, namely poor knowledge, I think. But anyway, it's not the topic. And next two padas is parinipute Jattumase Hesati Pattasangu. So here, I just understood like Parinipute is a locative absolute of Parinipati, and Jattumase is an accusative. So during the 4th month, and Hesati is an be verb of a future, and Pattasangahu is the first collection, namely the first council. So from these analyzes, it can be translated as, or it can be understood as, during the 4th month after my death, there will be the first council. So it conveys that the first council was held on the 4th month after the Buddha's parinibbana in the Dipabangsa. Right? It has no problem, but the problem is verse number 25 here. Here, tato parang, after this. Well, actually, we do not know exactly, clearly what the term tato means here. So anyway, after this, so this could be, tato could be after the Buddha's death or after the previous council. First council or second council, whatever. It's a problem. And also it is gonna be the topic of my talk today, and other vocabularies like that. Wassa satte, wassa something, and atrasani. Everything these things are just a numeral stuff. So if we could just join, it means 118 years after that. But here, as I've already mentioned, we do not know exactly, clearly, what means then that here. Dato means that. And the remaining two padas, Tatio Sangaho, it refers absolutely the third council. And then Hoti here, the form of Hoti is present, but it also could cover the future tense. And then Babata Ataya, for the purpose of a procedure. So I understood like there's a third council for the purpose of furthering the teaching, like that. Oh, as we see in my analysis is, so I just want to translate these two verses like, just like the sun sets, I would die without reminder. And then during the 4th month after my death, there will be the first council. And 118 years after that, there's a third council for the purpose of furthering the teaching. Is the understanding of these two verses. The problem is that here, that though. Oh, I just want to raise two hypotheses here. So, in my opinion, Tatoparang refers to either the second council without description, and also it could refers to the first council, but it needs some emendations. Is my hypothesis. So let me check about these two hypotheses with me. Well, actually, if you see the whole paragraphs, whole the structure of the 24 and the 25 verses, that though is very specific. It's clearly referring back to something supposedly just stated. But the event that I think it refers to is not mentioned here exactly. So technically, actually, Lamot is correct, absolutely correct. Yeah, it just referred to has referred to the last event mentioned, namely the first council. But assuming that the second council has been omitted here, the description of verse number 25 exactly corresponds to the following sentence of Atasalini. Yeah, please have a look at this quotation. So it is the Buddha's prediction from the Atasalini, the representative commentary of Theravada tradition. So it mentions that here, at the end of 218 years after my death, a monk named Mokkalliputta and then blah, 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 and would distribute the treatise Gautama to the size of Digha Nikaya. So as is well known, Mokkalliputta is one of the organizers of the third council. So that means this phrase of Atasalini refers to that the third council was organized at around 218 years after the Buddha's death. So it is exactly what I understood from the verse of Dipavamsa above. So my first hypothesis. So my first solution is that Dato here. The verse of Dipavamsa. Dato refers to the second council, and the writer just omit the description of it because it is not important for him or her. The editor. And for supposing this, let me draw the Edward Hallekar, the book What is History here. So according to Edward Hallekar, all history is contemporary history, meaning that history consists essentially in seeing the past through the eyes of the present and in the light of its problems, and that the main work of the historian is not to record, but to evaluate. For if he does not evaluate, how can he know what is worth recording? According to Hallekar. So, in my opinion, my hypothesis, where the redactor of the text Dipavamsa evaluated his source as as you see, the Edward Hallekar mentioned here. So it is getting clear what the redactor of the Dipabangsa did highlight with these verses. If we have a look at, as you see, the structure of the first chapter here. So the chapter of the first chapter consists of purifying the eye of Lanka, and the first and third councils, as we've already checked. And after that, Asoka and Minda, and protecting the Isle of Lanka, something like that, these topics like that. So given that, this structure consists of like this, Tato here is, I think the first and the third council are worth recording for the redactor of the Dipabangsa. And secondly, the Dipabangsa highlights the origin and the transmission here. So the first council conveys the origin. Our Theravada Buddhist tradition is from the Buddha, and then so Buddha's life or something like that is the first council. And the third council conveys the transmission from the mainland, the Indian mainland, to Sri Lankan Isle of Lanka here. So if we have a look at this screen, we could conclude like that the second council seems to be not important here, actually, because the first chapter just want to highlight the origin and the transmission of Theravada tradition. So for the redactor of Dipabangsa, at least within the first chapter, the second council is not needed. It's not worth mentioning here. It's my first hypothesis. And my second solution for my second hypothesis is two kinds of emendation. So firstly, my guru, Andrew Skilton in Oxford, suggested me this speculative emendation for supporting my interpretation. This one is Oldenberg, the original Pali text of Dipabangsa, verse 25. Tato parang wasasatte vasani attarasani cha tatyo sangahoti pavata taya sasanang here. So the problematic term here, tato parang, if we imagine like this, if we try to have a speculative emendation, it could be translated, it could be re-edited like tato dube wasasatte vasani something, blah blah blah. So if we replace the term parang to dube, only two words, two letter, that means the verse 25 refers to 218 years after that. Here, Tato means the first council. There will be the third one. Exactly, completely the meaning is meaningful. So this is speculative emendation. All it requires is just emending two letters, parang and then dube. So if we, of course, it's just speculative emendation, but if we replace parang to dube, the text makes complete sense. I mean, if we compare to other Theravada Pali sources. And then my thesis regarding Edward Hallekar's observation is entirely supported if we give like this speculative emendation of parang to dube. That is my second solution. And then my third solution is an alternative reading from Manchester manuscript here. Is that it was it's from the Tillman Fresh, a historian of Burma, and he published an interesting critical article about the publication of Dipabangsa. So according to him, John Ryland's Library of Manchester University has a new manuscript of Dipabangsa, which is a wholly different version of that Oldenberg used. But unfortunately, Tillman Fresh did not mention the whole phrase of it. He just mentioned some of them, namely only just the two phrases. Tutio hesati sangato, and then tayo dvi sattavassani. Like that. Tilman Frasch mentioned the two phrases like this one, which are missed in the version of Odenberg. So if it is added to the second and the third padas of the verse 20, verse number 25, it could be like that. Tato parang wasasate tutio hesati sangato, tayo dubisata basani, bata taya sasana. So it refers that 100 years after the first council, tato parang, there will be the second council. And then after 2 years later, there will be the third one. There is quite sensible like that. So let me summary of my talk. It's time, right? Yeah. So it's my summary of my talk. So tato possibly refers to either the tato could refer to the second council. So in this case, the redactor did not mention this council, the second council, any detail. And the redactor just used the pronoun for mentioning it because it was not, worth reading, at least in this chapter. It's my first one. And then secondly, tato possibly refers to the first council. But it needs a speculative emendation. So replacing parang to dube, as you've already checked, dube, to make complete sense. All it requires is just emending two letters, parang and then dube. So it's also very interesting possibility. And then thirdly, lastly, tato might refer to the first council. So according to Tilman Frasch, there's a new manuscript in John Ryland's library of Manchester University, but unfortunately he just gave us two small padas. So if we add them to the version of Odenberg, it also makes sense. So here, my conclusion is, 뒷바방사, the original text, is innocent. Yes, it's not guilty. So it is, in my opinion, this original text is still worth reading for the purpose of understanding the early history and myth of Theravada tradition, I think. So we easily just consider that the Dipabangsa is just poorly edited and it consists of broken Pali structures, and finally, it is just a broken text. But the text, Dipabangsa, is still waiting for us to be amended by new manuscript and new interpretations or new hermeneutics, I think. So that's all what I've prepared. Thank you for attending. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you very much indeed, Assistant Professor Kongri Kim. So the Dipa Vamsa and the Maha Vamsa are representative of Vamsa genre, which has been transmitted on the Theravada countries. The Dipa Vamsa, the oldest chronicle that is the chronicle that conveys unmodified sources compared to other later chronicles, such as Mahavamsa. Assistant Professor Kim work focuses on the narrative of the Buddha's praise and prophecy of the Lankadipa found in Dipavamsa. So this is Q&A time. Anyone, if you have any question, you can tapping the hand icon and ask the question to Assistant Professor Kim.
Oh, well, if you do not have a question, I have one more information. I forgot. I missed one information. Sorry. So I have mentioned the Manchester manuscript. So thanks to Andrew Skelton in Oxford, we are now asking for the new manuscript for sending us the PDF file. But unfortunately, it is written in Burmese manuscript. Burmese letters. So I cannot approach it. So just we are waiting for the answer from the library. But if we get it, it's going to be quite interesting for understanding the verse 24 and then 25 of the first chapter of Dipabangsa. But I'm not sure. I'm just still waiting for the answer of the library. That's all.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you for the information. So Professor Frank, you seem to have a question, please. Please unmute your microphone.
I'm really delighted to hear a real scholar like Dr. Kim talk about Asian Lamat's massive tome, A History of Indian Buddhism. And I have a question about that because I got my copy when it first came out. I think it was 1988. Was on very thin onion skin paper. And then I was waiting
Sorry,
for
I cannot hear you.
massive work of scholarship. I didn't hear any reviews. I didn't see any reviews of Lamat's impressive book in a couple of years after its publication. And then I thought, why? Maybe this book is just too amazing. Nobody would want to take issue with it or review it seriously. And then I got not interested in this and I let it go. I didn't look for reviews of Lamat anymore of that book, History of Indian Buddhism. But it always struck me as an amazing tour de force. I wonder what the scholarly opinion is a decade on now. Have there been reviews of Asian Lamat and by whom? Do you happen to know? It would be very interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'm not that much, very academic in this field. I'm just researching. I just started to research this field, but as far as I know, especially the Dipabangsa is considered as kind of myth rather than history stuff or something like that. So I think that's why, especially the research on the Dipabangsa is kind of the much highlighted in the Asian, lots of scholars in contemporary scholars, I think. But as I've already told you, I think the Dipabangsa is very it's just innocent. I mean, Dipabangsa, the text is waiting for our interpretation and the research, I think. So if we do that, the text is gonna show you lots of very interesting information about that, I think. I'm just a beginner of this field, so I will check about it, what you mentioned. Thank you.
I'm interested in that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next we have another question from Professor Sunil. So if you have a question. Oh, your microphone, let me check.
Thank you for interesting talk, Dr. Kyung-Nae Kim, and I really enjoy your talk on the Dipabangsa. But you just analyze the text according to the earlier history. But the better way, this is my suggestion, better way we can deal with this issue is to check the situation in Sri Lanka where Dipabangsa was constructed. So maybe around the 2nd century, 3rd century, or 4th century in Sri Lanka, maybe Anuradhapura, people what could be the most important event according to the Mahavihara tradition in Anuradhapura and their relations to Abhayagiri Vihara maybe, and what kind of things during that time people are more interested in. As you mentioned, the second council might be not that interesting. The why, if we really think about that, we should think about the situation in Sri Lanka and 2nd and 3rd century. The second council, partially younger generation actually kicked out. So 2nd and 3rd century in Anuradhapura, when I think about it, there is a confrontation between Mahavihara and Abhayagiri. So maybe, the text, Dipabangsa was wrote mainly by Mahavihara, and maybe that's kind of environment can intervene into the person who composed Dipabangsa. Maybe they just elided second council or something like that. So instead of just dealing with the text, my suggestion is checking the environment. situation of Mahavira in Anuradhapura in 2nd, 3rd century, then we can get more information. This is my suggestion.
Thank you so much for your suggestion. Yeah, I will keep in mind. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Assistant Professor Kim and Professor Sunil. Okay, next, let me invite the next guest. Okay, so now we are pleased to welcome Venerable Virasak Jayadhammo from the International Buddhist Study of MCU. Venerable Pramaha Virasak Suvarnawong, widely known as the Prajanta. He is a noble follower of Dhamma. He obtained a Bachelor of Business Administration, a major in computer, and working from the Edith Cowan University, Western Australia. He also obtained a Master of Arts in Peace Studies from MCU, Thailand. Prajanta is working on editing the 2nd edition of Introduction of Early Buddhism, Philosophical Texts, Concepts, and Questions by Professor Dr. Frank J. Hoffman. Currently, Ajanta is a lecturer at the International Buddhist Study College of MCU and serves as the editor of the Journal of the International Association of Buddhist University, published by MCU, and his research interests include Theravada Buddhism, Abhidhamma, and early Buddhism. Apart from conducting a research, Prajanta is also a chief abbot of Buddha Panya Monastery and offers a scholarship for both Thai and foreign Dhamma seekers in guidance in mindfulness meditation practice and teaching Buddhist philosophy. And today he will be presenting his work on the 10 last lives of Bodhisattva in Jataka story, narrating the Theravada Buddhism. Please, Venerable.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Professor. I hope you can see my screen.
Please let me check. I cannot see your screen yet.
Okay, give me 1 sec.
Okay, so Venerable will be sharing with us the 10 last lives of the Bodhisattva in Jataka stories in Theravada Buddhism. And I think this is widely known story for the Buddhist followers. Okay, now we can see your screen. So now please continue.
So my topic is quite very well known for Southeast Asia, especially Theravada culture. Thailand, Laos, Cambodians, Burmese, and also some of the southern of Vietnam, I think. And also in Sri Lanka, also quite a little bit similar to us. So today we're talking about the 10 last life of the Bodhisattva in Jataka story, narrating in Theravada Buddhism. So as far as I study about these topics, I found that Jataka tales in the Mahajura version, the Thai Tipitaka version, there are only 547 stories in there. And another version that if we read through from the Bali Text Society or in Sri Lankan version, that might be 550 stories, slightly different, but yeah, today we're talking about the last 10 story before the recount story from some of the past life of the being who would eventually become the Buddha. So final 10 story called Maha Nipadas or Totsachad Chadok, that's in Thai language. So what topics here? So Bodhisattva and the Buddha. Due to our International Buddhist Study College building a small statue of Bodhisattva in our garden, which means some of our students don't know that who they are. And I would like to show the pictures a little bit. Oops. We will. I hope everyone can see the pictures.
We seeing the text, the PDF files that you show.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. The PDF, yeah. So I think it's quite difficult for me to share another pictures. It just come up. So the Bodhisattva in Thailand has been found in southern of Thailand, especially in Wat Phra Boromathat Chaya city, Surat Thani province, southern of Thailand. That was first, I think that was first discovered that southern of Thailand used to be Mahayanist long ago. I think it's mostly same period as Borobudur in South countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. And Ajahn Buddhadasa also he keep that broken statue of Bodhisattva and then preserved like that. So he put on his temple. And right now we also keep that statue in our International Buddhist Study College. So for our student can discover, southern of Thailand used to be Mahayanist before. And I think it's more importantly about the Bodhisattva is the Avalokitesvara that we found in southern Thailand. That's around 1,100 something Buddhist era, and which compared to Guan Yin nowadays is more beautiful like a woman. But the one we found in southern of Thailand is absolutely the male Bodhisattva. So that's the point of the Bodhisattva, that's a big house. And we talk about 10 last life of Bodhisattva, which means in Southeast Asia, the narrative of Bodhisattva that we have learned from the Totsachada or Maha Nipada, which means the Bodhisattva has been reincarnated life to next life and life until he reached to the end, as the end of the 10 last life was Vesantara. So, and then after Vesantara, he became the Kotama, and then he became enlightened under the Bodhi tree in Bodhagaya. So, Pali canons or Tipitaka, that's a Pali and English here. Yeah? So, MCU have joined big program with the government to translate the Thai Tipitaka to English. I hope that will be finished within the next couple of years. So the Thai version also including with the commentaries. So the Tipitaka itself is 45 books and commentary about 55. Altogether is 90 books. So now I would like to introduce you to see the 10 last life in Thailand, especially most of the pictures. We cannot find exactly brand new artists to draw such a beautiful like the old stuff. So most of these figures come from temples around Thailand. Some come from Bangkok, some come from south, some come from northern like Chiang Mai. Depends on the artist. So the first one is Dhamma. Dhamma refer to a Bodhisattva was a crown prince named Dhamma. This was King Kasi have a 16,000 wife. He have a lot of wives. The Bodhisattva was his only child. So when he was born healthy and with auspicious mark, the king gave his chief queen, Chanta Devi, a wish for anything she wanted. She chose to keep for future use. When the Bodhisattva was 1 month old, he saw his father sentenced for theft to torture and death. The father cruelty scared him and prompted him to remember that in a recent past life, he has gone to hell after being a king to avoid suffering. This phase again, he did not want to become kings after his father. A goddess who lived in the umbrella that shaded him sent his worry and told him that if he acted disabled, deaf, and mute, he would not be the crown king. The Bodhisattva took her advice, and from then on lay completely unresponsive at all times. For 16 years, the king and the queen tried to break the Bodhisattva of his behavior by withholding foods, offering cake, covering him with molasses, and letting flies bite him, letting gorgeous women seduce him, placing him over fire until his skin blistered, and other such tricks and torture. And all this time, not one did the Bodhisattva break, because torments of hell are farther than the last, far longer. So when the Bodhisattva come to an age, King Kasi warned that he wasn't killed. Cataphor would befall his kingdom out of fear. The king agreed to do it. A devastated Queen Jandadevi tried to use her stockpiles, wished to save their son. While the king would not reconsider the execution, he disagreed to postpone it for 1 week. But desperate period, the queen could not get the Bodhisattva to move or speak. When the time came, the king has the Bodhisattva driven out to the shallow ground to be killed and buried, no longer able to be the king since he was banished. The Bodhisattva was finally free as the chaos struck a grave, and Bodhisattva stood up and found himself as strong. He could lift the chariot as if it were a child toy. He revealed himself to his intended executioner, told his story, and ordered the man to bring his parent out to see him. In the meantime, he began a humble religious life at ascetics after discussing righteousness with his parents. They and tens of thousands of other people decided to abandon their worldly life and take religious vow as the ascetics. Under the Bodhisattva teaching, they all live out their day in a giant forest hermitage built and supplied by Indra, king of God. This is a short story. I try to make it as brief as I can. And the Dhamma was characterized as the disabled person and try to renunciate. So until he become ascetic at the end, which means in this story, he performed his perfection as the Nekkhamma Parami or renunciation Parami. So that's the first Parami in the first of the 10 last life. The second one is Chanaka or Mahachanaka Jataka. So I will try to make it brief as much as I can, so audience can read more in the text. Mahachanaka has been very famous in the last 10 years in Thailand due to the King Ramanai. He also composed a new version of this Mahachanaka. So Mahachanaka here, I found these pictures quite old, and I think many of you may interesting about the Thai art in Buddhist story. So this was post for sale on internet, but I like this because it's old enough. And Mahachanaka, that was in Thai, and also Bali. Mahachanok in Thai and Mahachanaka in Bali. So you can find that the story is about Bodhisattva was one windows, queen son named Mahachanaka. Her husband, King Arita Chanok, fears being betrayed by his brother, Prince Pola Chanaka. So he has him arrested. Pola Chanaka was so thoroughly righteous, the god helped him escape his prison cells and leave the city through Pola Chanaka. Has absolutely no ill intent towards the king before his imprisonment. Afterwards, he considers him as an enemy and soon returned to kill him and take the throne. After the war, Arita Chanaka, pregnant queen, disguised as a present with her gold and jewel hidden in a basket of rice, fled to a distant city where the Bodhisattva was born. When the Bodhisattva came to an age, he went off to reclaim his father's throne, using half of his mother's treasure to found the venture. Bodhisattva boarded a ship sailing to Suvarnabhumi, the golden land of the east. After 7 days at sea, the ship sank. As it went down, he ate a big meal, covered his body with sugar and ghee, and put on extra clothes covered with oil and water. Around the boat, turned red from fish and turtle, eating the ill-fated passenger, but the Bodhisattva used his special strength to leap far away from the ship and avoid a similar fate. And unbeknown to him, on the same day, his uncle, the king, died. Bodhisattva floated helplessly for a week before the goddess of the ocean rescued him and carried him to a mango grove near his family palace. The king had no brother and son to inherit the throne, and none of the palace nobles made his daughter approval. One of several deathbed conditions the king had laid down for a successor. Since Princess Sivali couldn't find a new king, The chaplain set the royal chariot loose, a footproof method to find someone with sufficient merit to be a great king. The horses pulling its stop at the stone where the Bodhisattva lies sleeping through the chaplain did not know who the Bodhisattva was. He saw the sign of royalty on his feet, and he was proud right then and there. He ruled wisely and benevolently, beloved by all, and made Sivali his queen. He brought his mother home, and his life was filled with endless joy. Many years later, the Bodhisattva encountered two mango trees, one full of fruit and another without. After he ate a mango, people destroyed the fruitful tree in search of more, but left a barren tree unharmed, seeing his as the metaphor for life. Having a procession lead a mystery, the Bodhisattva left his body behind and struck off the Himalaya to live at the ascetics. At this distraught Queen Sivali followed him out of town and displayed his repeat order to turn around. They passes a gift sifting sand with two bracelets on one wrist and only one of the other. Bodhisattva explained that the two bracelets together made annoying noise, but the single bracelet was peaceful. Later, he plucked a breast of glass and told her they were like it. They could not never be rejoiced, overcome with grief by her husband. Callousness, her passed out, and Bodhisattva was finally able to sneak away. Queen Sivali returned to the city, proud of her son and next king. They lived the rest of her life at the ascetic in the mango grove. So overall, the Mahachanaka character is performing perfection of endurance or Vinaya. So on the pictures, it's clearly that he was endurance in the sea when his ship was broken down. So the third story is Sama. Sama was in Thai called Suvarnasam. Sama was the Bodhisattva, was one of son of true ascetic, the chief of the true hunting village, long-time friend on the two of the children, Tukukala and Parika, to marry each other when they come of an age. Growing up, they were not normal children and lived thoroughly religious life devoted to righteousness and purities. After their parents put them through a forced marriage, they left the city to live at ascetics deep in the Himalayas. Their life enriched on fruit and roots gathered in the forest, and their virtue was too strong. So even animal living around them did not harm each other. Indra, king of God, so foresaw they would go by one day. So he urged them to have a child to look after them when the time have come. They refused to violate their celibacy by Indra explained how Duku Laka could impregnate Parika by touching her navel at a special time. And this is how Bodhisattva was conceived. When he was 16 and Anki snakes spit venom to his parents' face because of predicted tragedies. Bodhisattva cared for them without hesitation, gathering all their food and water with the help of their caring which corrected one without while out hunting. The king was amazed to see Bodhisattva walking with deer, and he desperately wanted to know his story. Assuming the Bodhisattva would flee if he saw him, the king shot the Bodhisattva with a poisoned arrow to stun him so he could approach and talk. As the Bodhisattva lay dying with the blood flowing out of his mouth, the king lied that he had shot him by mistake after a deer had run off. But upon hearing the Bodhisattva story, the king felt deep remorse and confesses his crime. And as requested just before the Bodhisattva lost consciousness, he promised to take care of the Bodhisattva parents. The king found a forest home and broke the terrible news to his parents. They cried in agony, but forgave the king. At the request, he took them to see the son body, and finding that he has not yet died, they pray for God and save him if they had made enough merit through previous life. They has, and not only was the Bodhisattva fully healed, but his parents' sight was restored. The king returned home and become righteous, generous ruler. So the Suvarna Sam or Sama Jataka performing the perfection, story of perfection of loving and kindness. So number 4, I will try to make it more short as possible. I think most of us already, some of us maybe read this story already. So the number 4, Mee Jataka. Mee Jataka was one king named Mee. He previously reigned the wisdom and virtue for 84,000 years as a king, Makateva, and on the day his barber falls the gray hair, he passes the throne to his eldest son and live out his final 84,000 years as ascetics before being reborn in heaven. He was with pride and his son, his grandson, and on through a total 84,000 minutes. 2 generations follow his exact same path through life and death, always ruling righteously, but he now knew that he and his family had not quite done enough to be on the path to Nibbana. So he decided to return to earth as a present king's son to finish off the line. So Nemi, the king Nemi, performing perfection of determination, atitana, which means he have determining to become the Nibbana. So number 5, Mahosot, Mahosata Chataka or Mahosot Chadoks. So the brief story of Bodhisattva Mahosot. The Bodhisattva was one of the king advisor named Mahosata on the day that Bodhisattva was received. King Veteha dreams of a great fire on his palace, and his 4 advisors explained that means a new advisor, wiser than all of other men and God, would soon be born and eventually come to serve him. So Bodhisattva was an exceptional, bright and precocious child by age. 7 7, there was nobody wiser, stronger, and more beautiful in the whole kingdom of the king Veteha. The king Veteha wanted to hire him, but Seneca, his chief advisor, did not want to lose his status and recommended to watching the Bodhisattva for a while, ensure that he was really the one predicted in the kingdoms. So Mahosat or Mahosattha is performing his perfection as the wisdom. So he's very smart. He helping the king through the country with the righteousness. And number 6, Puritatta Shataka. A brief story of Puritatta Shataka. Oops. That's a Mahosat. That's a Puritatta. The Bodhisattva human grandfather, Prince Brahmatatta, has been banished by his paranoia. Father, the king who worried, Brahmatatta would seize the throne from him. He lived alone in the wilderness, waiting for his father to die, at which time he would become king. A widow Naga woman took a human form and visited the realm of men, looking for a husband. She came up with flower, not a true ascetic at heart. The flower filled him with joy, so he quit a holy life and they got married. They lived in Paris. She magically summoned and had 2 children, a son named Sakara and daughter named Samudaya. As the father was human and when the king finally died, Brahmadatta returned with his children to rule, but his wife said she could not live amongst other men, and so she returned to the Naga realm alone. So Puritatta performing the perfection of virtue or sila. The number 7, Chanda. The Bodhisattva was one up on a crown prince named Chanda. The king chaplain was thoroughly corrupt, and when the serving as judge, he took bribe and cheated people. One of his victims fell at the Bodhisattva feet and begged him to tell the king the truth about the chaplain out of pity. He took the man back to the court and judged the case himself, fighting in his favor and returning his property. The people approached and Bodhisattva and the king appoint him a judge, cut off from his Ulysses' income, and Japan decided to kill him. The king was not religious, but after dreaming about heaven, and he asked his chaplain how to get there. Seizing the opportunity, the chaplain told the king he must perform the 4-fold sacrifice, killing 4 of each kind of living creature, from human to bulls to birds, including 4 of his family. The king told him to arrange it promptly. The Bodhisattva knew the chaplain was seeking revenge against him, and the 4-fold sacrifice just to reach the height at the fact from the king. But he could stop him. Citizens protest the street, and the king parents pressed the tear for him to stop his monstrous act, but the king would not listen. His heart was broken about killing his family, but he trusted his chaplain and would do whenever it took to get into heaven. Bodhisattva was taken to the chopping block first. The chaplain stood beside him with sword and in the hand. Chief queens pray for divine intervention. Indra, king of God, heard her plea and came down to earth. He threatened the frightened the king and stopped the sacrifice. A mob stoned and chaplain to death, banished the king, and put the Bodhisattva on the throne. So Janta Jantaha or Jantakuman, he became the king afterward, and he's performed patient character of patient or khanti. He have more tolerance on that. Number 8, Mahanara Kassapa. So the Bodhisattva this time named Narada, Natha or Narada. The Natha is mean Thai pronunciation, but Narada in Bali. The Bodhisattva was a god named Narada, the powerful righteous king. Angati made a naked ascetic who preached a false doctrine, embracing greed, and there is no heaven or hell, no sin, and those who help others are feastable fool, and the naked ascetics proclaim King Angati embraced this message and declare that from then on out he would dedicate himself to enjoy life to its fullest. At the next holiday, his beloved daughter, Prince Ruja, full of great merit, came to collect the money she would give for Amrao, and she always did. But her father refused to give her any. He would deny her no luxury. King Akati said, following holiday vows was a waste of time and money. All her worry about virtue was pointless, and he would not support it. The Bodhisattva assured the king that karma was real, and people determined their destiny. The king mocked his belief by asking for a loan for 500 coins, promising to repay him 1,000 after he died. The Bodhisattva drew a shout of delight when he replied that he could not collect death in the hell where the king was going. He followed this up with a description: to hell endless torment, such as having your body torn apart by flock of ravens, having to pull a chariot across burning ground, and climbing tree with swords and leaf. Fear the hell finally made the king rethink his decision, and he let the Bodhisattva teach him the path of purity. So Narada, he performed perfection of equanimity, ubekha. So number 9, Vitura Bandit. This from Vitura Bandita Chataka. The Bodhisattva brought one of the king advisor named Vitura Bandit one day for great king Indra, king of the god, another king Garuda, king, and king Tanajaya. The Bodhisattva king sat down to chat. They got to discussing which of them was the most virtuous, and each felt they were superior than the other. So they asked the Bodhisattva to decide, and he answered that all four were equal. This pleased the king immensely, and they showered him with gifts. When the Naga king told the queen about the Bodhisattva wisdom, and she decided she must meet him, she told her husband that she did not obtain the Bodhisattva heart, she would die, and distressed Naga king wanted to satisfy his queen, but he didn't know anyone who would do such a wicked thing. Then he found a solution. He asked his beautiful daughter to seek a husband who would get the Bodhisattva heart, and in order to save her mother's life, she agreed. She sang out her ability, and Punnaga, a nephew of the Goblin king Vesavana, fell in love instantly and agreed to kill the Bodhisattva. There was no way anyone could just cite the Bodhisattva, but the king Dhanajana was a renewed gambler, and Punnaga would win him at this game, and he bet his flying horse and magical gem against everything the king owned. Other than his body, his serenity, and through his special power, Punnaga won the game and claimed his prize. They flew off the mountain peaks, where Punnaga grabbed the Bodhisattva and was about to throw him over a cliff when he decided to ask Punnaga why he was wanted him to death. Hearing about Naga queen request and princess promise, the Bodhisattva realized this was a misunderstanding. The heart of the saga is the wisdom. There being no reason for Naga queen to want him to death, she must have asked someone to bring him there to peace, and they misinterpreted her word. At the Bodhisattva request, Punnaga took him to the Naga realm alive, and he was correct about misunderstanding, and the Naga king and queen were greatly pleased to hear him preach. So this perfection of truthfulness, satya. So the last one, Vesantara, is quite very well known in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. Vesantara always celebrate in local temple. They have a very fancy group of people doing a lot of dana on that day. So the story of Vesantara, I will try to make it brief as possible. So the last life of the Bodhisattva before he became the Gautama Buddha. The Bodhisattva was a prince named Vesantara. He was free from impurity and as generous as anyone could be. Just a moment after he was born, he asked his mother, Queen Pusati, to give him money so he could donate it, and his incomparable generosity continued throughout his childhood. Eventually, King Sanjaya abdicated in favor of his son, and as king, Vesantara continued to offer charity to anyone who asked for it. When a neighboring kingdom suffered drought from a famine, to give them the city auspicious white elephant, which ensure rain wherever it went. The Bodhisattva royal subjects were horrified by his and feared the kingdom would ruin without the elephant.